Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. To some of you and peace to the rest of you. Blackheart is signing black in, asking you to hit that share button even before the like or the subscribe, because the message is more important than the messenger. And that being said, this message is going to clarify something I put in my last message, and then I'm going to get to the content of this one that I intended. In my last message, my last video, I was pretty much clarifying something in words that most of us already know without articulating it. The message wasn't really that deep, but I recorded it for a reason. And the reason is because a lot of times we understand certain things, but we can't articulate them very well. And we might think that if we can't articulate them, then maybe nobody else has noticed them. And if we tried to articulate them, and then people understood what we were trying to say, that we might sound paranoid or foolish or crazy. But let's be honest with ourselves, brothers. Whether you were select or non-select, all you had to know was that women treated different men differently, and you had red pill knowledge, some sort of red pill awareness. When you had it, nobody wanted to. If you tried to explain it, back then people might say you're paranoid. Or if you were one of those select guys that said, wait a minute, these women ain't doing this for them, then you sounded like you were bragging, even if you were just trying to make an observation or voice an observation. But if we're honest with ourselves, the discussion has been necessary, and it has been attempted before, but the internet and then later social media facilitated it with new vocabulary. So in all honesty, what's going on here is that really there are a lot of things that people who don't use the internet much or who don't use social media much truly don't understand. And that is the difference between the truly ignorant and the intentionally, willfully, maliciously ignorant. Some simply don't care to understand what others deal with. And it's not because they can't solve the problem, it's because they just simply they wouldn't even want to know that it exists. And they're the people who, if you tried to prevent a particular problem, would make fun of you for taking extra steps to prevent something they don't know really exists. So if you are a younger man in middle school and you're watching how women behave towards men and how men behave towards women, and you decide, okay, I see them mistreating this guy over here. I don't want to be that dude, so I want to learn from them what they hate about him so much so I don't do it and I don't get the same treatment. Just because you tried to get some of that intel, some of your boys are going to sit up and say that you're being stupid. So if you make this move, you got to make it on the sly. I mean, you can't even tell your partners, your homies, what it is you're trying to do and what you're trying to learn. Because them niggas, woo, them niggas act like you committed blasphemy or something. But if you were to say, well, yeah, man, I'm just going to go for it, even though she's a teacher. And you say, I'm going to ask her out on a date. And you say something like that. You do this. What do you think is going to happen? I mean, what are your partners going to tell you? Are they going to tell you, bro, that's dumb as hell, you ain't going to do nothing but get yourself in trouble? No. Because it takes bravery, they're going to say, yeah, go ahead and do it. And granted, you may understand why it is that they would respect the bravery. We all respect extra nerve and extra courage, that's true. But what happens when you decide, okay, you're gonna do something smart and not just brave, but also intelligent? You're gonna actually learn something about the subconscious or the secrets that women are holding from men. You decide that, and guess what the hell happens? Man, them brothers act like you just as dumb as you can be. Like, how dare you even try to go and get intel and do something better than us? No, man, what are you doing? Just go out there and try. That's what a guy says when he doesn't know game. Either he doesn't know game or he doesn't want you to know about it. That's the truth of the matter. If you say that you want to do something and be smart and understand what's going on, understand the process, and somebody says to you, no, just get out there and try, take your risk and fail, and you're like, I'd like to know what I'm doing first, that's somebody that doesn't understand game. They don't even know the definition of the word game that they're telling you. They just saying game. Game is your ability to get bitches and find bitches at that. Bitches that have options in other men. And I'm using the word bitch not to insult women, but to quote the men who talk like this. To speak from their mindset, to tell you exactly how they sound so you remember what you've heard before. I myself really don't like to walk around just calling people bitch at random. I certainly don't. Now, when I talk about the Western white bitch or the Western black bitch, I'm talking about the bitch. I'm not talking about every woman. And I don't apologize for that. Because when a man mistreated, when my cousin's husband mistreated her and I saw the screenshots and knew that he'd actually done what she said, I didn't hesitate to call that nigga a bastard. A few other choice words. And no woman disagreed with me. Not one. But when I call some women bitches because of the choices they make, and then not only the wish, but the expectation and the demand that the men they shun come back and rescue their asses from the stupid choices, I get all kinds of pushback. We all do, actually, because we call these women bitches. They didn't just make a bad choice and then want to be rescued. No, most of us wouldn't call a woman a bitch for that. But then they make a bad choice. No, I'm sorry. They make a string of bad choices and expect and demand to be rescued by the guys that they shunned. Not only shunned, but the guys they insulted and told they were inferior. They expect that, demand it. And what happens to us? Well, what do they call? Nothing. So we got to call them bitches. And when these guys sit up and they tell you, yeah, man, you got to just get out there and get these bitches, man. Just get out there and do it. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it. Don't think about nothing. Just get out there and do it. What they're really telling you is go in stupid and blind and get off to a bad start. Some people like to say, immersion is the best way. Actually, that's not. Immersion is a good way to cement and become fluent in a language that you've already learned, but not to the level of fluency. It's the same thing with swimming. When you understand how the water works and how buoyant your body is or is not in the water and how to tread water, then you can go into the deep end. That's when you become a fluent swimmer, so to speak, but you don't start off in the deep end and you don't know how to swim. And that's what a lot of these niggas are trying to tell you. They want you to think that something's wrong with you because you don't just jump in the deep end without understanding. Until you ain't got no game and you ain't got no courage. What they're really telling you is, well, I don't really know how to succeed unless I'm just lucky or unless I just got something like that that's very superficial that gives me an advantage. So since I can't really tell you nothing different, I'm just going to tell you to get out there and jump in. If I'm having a swimming contest, or if I know that there's a swimming contest coming up, and I'm hanging out at the local pool with everybody, and we don't really know how to swim, or we're at that age where you just learn how to swim, yeah, of course, I would tell some of my most likely stiffest competitors, or my potentially stiffest competitors, just jump in the deep end. You're going to be all right. Before they learn how to swim. Why? To eliminate the competition if it's really that bad. And there are guys who say this because they really don't know any better. That's true. But we're not dealing with, in the manosphere, we're not dealing with penis police and Maamdingos who say things like this because they really don't know. We're dealing with penis police and Maamdingos who say things like this because they actually do know. What I'm trying to teach you about is exactly why I entitled this video the way I did, The Malice of the Maamdingos and the Matriarchs. They're not always saying things out of ignorance. Oftentimes they're saying things out of malice. See, what I came to understand when I was younger is that a lot of the things that women do are not malicious. Or at least I thought that was the case when I was younger. As I got older and I began to realize that a lot of it was subconscious, I started telling some women, well, this is what you're doing subconsciously and this is why you get this reaction. Subconsciously, you're going for this. So you don't have to hate the man. You can still teach men to be bad to you without knowing it, just like men can teach women to disrespect them without knowing it. A man can strike the wrong posture with the wrong clothes on and women subconsciously just lose respect for him. Well, it's the same thing with stuff you're doing. When I started telling this to women and pointing this out to them, a lot of times what was subconscious, instead of becoming absent because they were conscious of it, then became malicious because they weren't willing to let it go. It's like when you confront a racist that's not consciously racist. They don't have hatred. They just think they're better than you and you're abnormal. And when you point out to them that actually everybody's pretty jacked up, but they've been treating you like you're more jacked up than everyone else, and then instead of them saying, okay, that was wrong, they say, well, I can't treat you the same as everyone else. So now I'm going to be maliciously racist because I can't just not be racist. It's a similar thing, and that's what I've been dealing with. That's what I've noticed. 2 decades ago, a lot of this was subconscious. It wasn't malicious. 2 decades ago, when I was, a little over 2 decades ago, when I was dating my last girlfriend before the single mother that I dated, who wound up becoming the mother of my son, I remember her, country sister. She was thick. She wasn't fat yet. And that was going to come in later years. But at that time, she wasn't quite fat, but she was thick. In the North, she would have been considered fat. But I grew up in the South, deep South, not far from the coast of the Gulf of Mexico at all. So at that point, guess what? My mother had something to say about it. Now, my mother was telling me, it may be subconscious, son, but look, Blackheart, she's being nice to you because she's big. She's compensating for her size. She wouldn't be this nice if she wasn't that big. I said, whoa, you think she knows this? No, she probably doesn't. My mother did not realize even what she was saying. My mother was telling me what she later denied consciously. She was subconsciously telling me that she was aware that black women had me pegged and picked as an inferior man. Even though when my mother was coming up, my shade would have never counted against me. Somehow, through the change in trends, my mother was able to subconsciously pick up on the fact that a phenotype like mine was not going to help. They weren't okay with it. So, she was, from her, I later realized, not at that time, but I later realized that my mother subconsciously knew things that she was not aware of consciously, or that she was not consciously thinking, such as how I had been pegged by the women of our race. It was not malicious at that time. Later on, when my son's mother told me that she was pregnant, she was already a single mom, I had already come to certain awareness based on my mother telling me that one thing about the previous girlfriend. When my mother said what she said, that was a very pessimistic thing to say. And I was told never to be a pessimist. That's part of why I was told to never think that I was being treated differently by black women than they were treating other black men. I was told to not even think that when I voiced that observation. I was told that's paranoid, it's a persecution complex, you're crazy, you're delusional. I wasn't the only person in the world that was told these things. Many other guys, be they more attractive or less attractive to women than I was visually. Other guys who knew more how to manipulate women or less than I did. In other words, whose game was better or worse than mine. Many of these guys were also lied to. They were told certain things that weren't true. They were told that their observations were delusional, that they were crazy. They weren't really seeing what they were seeing, they were imagining it. So when I got older and I began to see, just going through some YouTube videos looking for some other stuff actually, I began to see this red pill stuff. I began to see things that other people had observed, and they were the exact same things as my observation. I remember once simply doing a search for one thing because you couldn't find an academic study on this. You just couldn't. But you could find people's observations on YouTube on anything. So what I did was I typed in, do women with, and I typed in a particular trait that I actually like in women. I typed in, do women with this trait have worse attitudes? YouTube videos came up. No academic studies, but YouTube videos came up. Now we take it for granted. Women that look better got worse attitudes, especially in the West. We just take this for granted. We know this. You don't need a study to prove it. When I tried to say this even a little over a decade ago, when I said that I had observed this, some people would say, well, that's what people think, but you know, it's a misconception. A lot of beautiful women are really cool. Well, no, a lot of them are friendly, but they're not necessarily going to admit when they're interested. They're not interested half the time. When they are, they're not necessarily going to admit it because they know they're cute and they want to be chased after and pursued. And so what happened is that, just like an example that I use when people confronted subconscious racism, and now this is a term known even in Arabic, so it's translated across languages. You confront them, and then sometimes a subconscious non-hateful racist becomes a consciously hateful, rabbit foaming at the mouth racist, because they're not going to go into their subconscious minds and check themselves. The same thing has happened here. With social media, mostly YouTube, where men have said, look, we know the game. Don't lie, bitch, we know the game. He's 6'4", got muscles, you can show him off to your friends. You're treating him differently. I'm normal, you treat me worse. I'm normal, you treat me like I'm a normal height, you treat me like I'm actually short. You treat me the same way as you treat a man that's too short. Even though my height's normal. I got a normal income, you treat me like I'm actually a broke dude. Guys in the middle get treated like they're actually at the bottom, whatever the metric is that women want. Brothers started saying, men started saying, we know the game, bitch. Don't lie about it. We're sitting here looking at it. One of the things that separates the women that we in the manosphere can respect from the women we cannot respect is simply the confrontation of their own subconscious. If they say, I'm not aware that I'm doing it, I'm not doing it consciously, and they don't think they're doing it, but they're not assuming that you're delusional, we can actually respect them. Some would say, I'm not doing this, at least not intentionally. I haven't really thought about it. I'm not going to assume that I am or not. I got to watch myself in the future. I got to see. We can say, okay, all right, that's a fair assessment. You may never do it again. Whatever it was you were doing, whether it was just disrespecting guys, that you didn't know you were disrespecting, you weren't thinking about it. Okay? You probably won't do it. But when you have to start dealing with the ones who look as you're talking, outright deny it, and then when you say to them, no, you did it, I got the videotape, they just get nasty about it and say, well, I can't really help it and get out of my face and I'm not changing nothing. Then those are the ones you can't respect. I can't forget when I got into a debate about polygamy shortly before I became Muslim. And this is one of the reasons that I was a polygamist before I was a Muslim. Even if I didn't practice it, I promoted polygamy, period. Sorry about the noise, y'all. There's not really much you can do about that. But I remember making my mind up a long time ago. No, I'm for polygamy, definitely. Absolutely. Minimum of 2 for every guy. Guess what happened? Got into a debate with a colleague of mine. What did she say? I pointed out, I gave her the survey and I said to her, you got a choice between 3 men in a hypothetical situation. These 3 men are from the same father and mother, so they look similar. They were, born a year apart, so they're similar in age. They work for the family business, so the incomes are about the same and the skill sets are the same. What's different about them is only one thing. One is a player. The other one is an ex-player, and the other one is still a virgin. Which one do you pick? Most of the women I asked said the ex-player. She also said the same thing. I said, why do you pick that? And she said, well, I get the commitment, but the benefit of his experience with other women. So I asked her pointedly, if your own standard demands that he be experienced with other women, if your own standard demands that he find a practice dummy before you, why should you not be one of those practice dummies since your standards demand that he find one? She said, oh, that's not fair. So I asked her, how do you mean that that's not fair, but your own standards demand it? You don't want the virgin because he's inexperienced. You don't want the player because you don't want the competition. Assalamu alaikum. Sukamano. Sukamdane. Sorry about that. I had to greet my colleague. Well, the thing was that she went from being subconsciously unfair to just being outright unfair by saying that this was unfair. She had mutually exclusive standards to begin with, and when I called her on it, letting her know, well, I know it's subconscious, but you got them, she then said, I'm not changing it. Now I'm aware that I got them, and I'm holding to them. I'm sticking to them. And justified polygamy right then and there at that point. The point of it all is that when you make people aware of what they were not aware of previously, what's going to wind up happening is that Either they're going to get rid of what it is you pointed out that was in the subconscious, or they're going to, Assalamu alaikum, or they're simply going to become consciously and maliciously whatever they previously were unknowingly. And that's what we've dealt with here. And that's why I call it the malice of the matriarch, the matriarchal Maamdingo and the matriarchs. Previously, they may not have known that they were like this. They weren't thinking about it. It was just taken for granted. Now you're telling them about it. And if they get up and they're saying, we ain't going, even if you pointed out to us something we didn't realize in ourselves, we're not changing, now they become malicious with it. Thank you, YouTube. I really appreciate that. I hope this has been a benefit. Black Heart signing, Blackout. Assalamu alaikum.